Okay, good afternoon, everybody. It's a pleasure to start and to host this webinar on a topic that is probably affecting all of us in the energy bubble. Heat pumps have recently been recognized as one of the most prominent and most useful tools to decarbonize Europe's residential, commercial, industrial sectors, as well as district heating. And the key question is, are they fit for purpose? Is the industry ready to deliver on the expectations that have put on the industry by the European Commission, several European governments, and in the end also end users? My name is Thomas Nowak. I'm the Secretary General of the European Heat Pump Association, and I will open this meeting and then hand over to a distinguished set of experts. Allow me a few slides before we start. I hope that you can see what I see on my screen. In the past years, the industry has seen double-digit growth. 2021 saw an outstanding 34% annual growth over the sales of 2020. And when I say 34%, I need to explain that we as EHPA, we are counting air-to-water and water-to-water units and geothermal units that we put into the hydronic category in this slide. We are counting air-to-air heat pumps that include VRF systems and air-to-air systems that are used for heating. So we are not counting the air conditioning units, and we are using some intelligence that we received from the Mediterranean member states that we have in our association, the member states associations. And then we're looking at sanitary hot water heat pumps, which we think is a great entry point for installers that are not so used to heat pumps because they could put them next to existing fossil fuel heating systems in the past, of course, also now, but single fossil energy heating systems will be a thing of the past within the next 5 years, we believe. So you see that this growth has happened rather unnoticed, I would say, and organically speaking. And the key question is, and the claim and the background of this online seminar is that it cannot continue like this. Business as usual is not an option if we want to decarbonize Europe's heating and cooling sector at the speed needed and at the volume requested. One additional argument that would support that claim is the development over the past, because here we're looking at the development of renewable heating and cooling in Europe. And despite the fact that we are looking at two different pieces of legislation of renewable energy directives, one in 2009, one in 2018, and we're currently discussing the third revision, the impact of this legislation on the use of renewable energy in heating and cooling has actually been comparatively small, has for sure stayed far below the expected growth rates. And if we are now discussing in the next revision a growth rates of 1.1 percentage points, and you see here that on average we had growth rates that were closer to 0.5 percentage points, then you see that we have a huge challenge ahead. Not only in changing the marketplace, but if the marketplace is responding and if end users are responding, then we also see that industry has to deliver on a much faster level. And looking into the future has always been difficult, and that hasn't changed now. At the same time, the European Commission has, I'd say from my memory, for the first time put heat pumps in one of their banners that have received high-level attention. So heat pumps have been knighted, you could say. They have been put next to wind and solar, also next to storage, as the four cornerstones of the energy transition in Europe, of the decarbonization of Europe's energy system. And they have also received a visual. If we deduct from this document some numbers for the future, then the challenge becomes very, very visible. We're looking here at, in dark blue, at the increase rates that would be feasible to deliver on the requirement of doubling annual sales within the next 5 years. So you see this, and after checking with the Commission, these doubling and all these numbers that were mentioned apply to hydronic heating systems. So we have made that split in this graph, and you see that if we want to do that, we will lead to about 2.2 million hydronic heat pumps in 2025 or 2026, and we will arrive at about 10 million additional heat pumps by 2030. We claim, however, as EHPA, that the world is not consisting only of hydronic heat pumps in the Nordics, in the Mediterranean, in many areas where it's getting warmer, air-to-air heat pumps are also a relevant and a used solution. So the overall recognition of heat pumps will lead to also more recognition of air-to-air units. And of course, there is one additional benefit to it. If we can really close energy cycles and use the waste heat that results from using air-to-air systems for cooling, then we can close the energy cycle and we can actually exploit the energy efficiency first principle to its maximum. So you see here that this is by no means a small feat. We have to change the whole heating system, the whole value chain, and that starts with R&D, because also the current solutions will most likely not be fit for purpose for the future. We have to redesign them, we have to make them smarter, smaller, and more silent when it comes to residential units, and we have to do much more fundamental research when we want to invest in the decarbonized industry. So all this needs to be done. We think it needs an all hands on deck approach. I'm very happy to have a set of panelists here that will shed some light on what is possible. I'm welcoming Andreas Scholz, who is the head of business units, heat pumps and data ahead, a German company, and his mission is to push heat pump manufacturing to the next level. When we discussed it prior to this meeting, he said there is one thing in adding an additional shift. It's completely different if you want to scale production, and so he is here to talk to us about that. He will be seconded by Holger Tamm, who has an economics background, business background, but is heading EU affairs at Stiebel Eltrum GmbH. So he's one of those that should benefit from Andreas's knowledge when they want to increase their production capacity, and they have declared that they would do so in the very near future. And then we have Jacek Strusinski, who is deputy head of unit in DG Grow for the green and circular economy unit. So his task is to help businesses to really become ready for a renewable-based industry in Europe through specific policy action. And he's supported by Serban Scrietu, who is policy officer in the same unit. And they have both, they will both present to us what the European Commission thinks is needed, and also how much, which financial solutions are available to support industry in this change. And we are also supported by Josephine Van Besselaar, who will moderate the rest of the meeting. And so I'm very happy to hand over to her. She's EHPA's head of EU affairs. Josephine, please.
Thank you, Thomas. I think with this great introduction, we can immediately move to the first presentation by Jacek and Serban to shed some light on the Commission's view on these ambitious targets, RePowerEU, and scaling up heat pump manufacturing. So I'll give the floor to you, Serban and Jacek.
Thank you very much, and thank you for your invitation this afternoon. I will just say a few words and then leave Serban to present the elements on heat pumps and our approach to them. What I would like to say is that indeed, Thomas, you rightly point out that for the first time, heat pumps have been given such a prominence in a strategic document of the Commission. But I would say more than that. So far, the Commission, with respect to the climate transition, has been focused pretty much on deployment. And of course, deployment is a major challenge. You know, doubling the renovation rate, doubling the deployment of heat pumps and so on is a very, policy-wise, is difficult to achieve. And I think the Commission is putting all efforts to make it happen. But in this strategic document, the Commission also acknowledged that in addition to demand, we also have to focus on supply, because such a dramatic increase of deployment also requires a very significant effort on scaling up production. And that's for two reasons. First, we see already, of course, across the economy that there are significant supply chain bottlenecks. Anyone that wants to order a car these days knows that. But for cars, it's different. We don't have to double the deployment rate of cars, except for electric cars, of course, in the next years. We have to do it for heat pumps. So the scale of the challenge is very different from other sectors. And the second reason is that we see a real risk that we will move from a dependency on Russian gas to a dependency on foreign technologies that are of strategic importance to our future energy system, heat pumps, wind, and so on. Also solar. Solar already happened 15 years ago, and we actually are now making also significant efforts to bring some of the production back to the EU through a dedicated alliance. So that's for background. And I would say that there are, I think, with respect to policy levers to address that, for deployment, I think it's already well developed. For 15 years, we've been doing that in the Commission. But for the supply chain upscaling, for this supply scale up, I think this is a kind of a new challenge. And there, as you said, Thomas, we talk about increased financing, notably easier state aid, possibly more money under the Innovation Fund. We also talk about addressing supply chain bottlenecks. So things like, what can we do to ease access to chips for your industry, or to copper, or to compressors. And so what I want to say here is that we are at the beginning of this reflection, but at the same time we have to move fast. So this meeting today is very important to us, and we see it really as not us telling you what the Commission intends to do, but above all listening to you, what are the real problems you see with respect to scale up, and what avenues you consider useful to address those problems. So with that, I would pass over to Sherban to go into the details. Thank you.
Yes, hello from my side as well. My name is Sherban Scrieciu, and I work for DG Grow, the unit on green and circular economy. So working with Jacek on these issues, and just echoing Jacek's point that our focus in our presentation is more on the heat pump manufacturing or production rather than deployment per se, which is another challenge to the whole sustainability and green transition puzzle. So on RePowerEU and this industrial dimension relating to heat pump manufacturing, I will first start talking a bit about RePowerEU in general, and then gradually focus into heat pump manufacturing issues and the policy dimensions. So for the RePowerEU, as you know, it has three main pillars. One is accelerating clean energy. Second one is saving energy, and the third one is diversifying energy sources. And all these three pillars are coupled with, of course, smart investments and different financial instruments and measures tackling all the three dimensions. And as you know, the RePowerEU is a very ambitious plan. It proposes a host of comprehensive measures. These were presented on the previous slide, but amongst these many measures, there are also important aspects relating to investments and the assessment of the investment needs. So this slide tells you the cumulative investment needs by 2027. So these are investment needs estimated, so kind of financial requirements, financing requirements, in order to realize RePowerEU objectives, and these are in addition to the Fit for 55 objectives. So yeah, on this slide, you see that these investment needs are split across several different dimensions, and the heat pumps have been placed within the saving energy and energy efficiency improvements window. So alongside these energy saving measures, and around almost 60 billion euros investment needs estimated for this window. Right, again, to smart investments, many measures which I'll talk a bit about some of these later in more detail, but this kind of provides you an overview of these measures. So one most important one is that the so-called recovery and resilience plans. Now they include a special window for RePowerEU chapter, but there's also funds from the cohesion policy and from European Agricultural Fund for Rural Development that can be transferred from these funds to the recovery and resilience plans, which in turn can also fund manufacturing of in general low carbon technologies, but also heat pumps. Also, another important aspect is that of an innovation fund, for which resources have been increased, and there's a call this year for a call, and I'll talk about this next slides, to be launched later this year. Now, just one slide on heat pump deployment side. So as you probably very well know, the objective is to double the current deployment rate of individual heat pumps, resulting in a cumulative 10 million units over the next 5 years. And these are mainly referred to hydronic heat pumps. Member states are also, of course, supported to accelerate the deployment integration of larger scale heat pumps. So there's wording here in relation to district heating systems and to exploiting industrial heat. And also there's the recognition, as mentioned before, that the deployment rates, such ambitious deployment rates, acceleration of deployment rates needs to be matched by a fast ramp up of production of the necessary equipment related to heat pumps, but also to other renewable technologies or low carbon technologies. So now on the RePowerEU and heat pump production or manufacturing side, the objective is simply to boost the supply chain on the European side, and also to avoid what happened in the case of solar technologies, that most of the European manufacturing was taken over by competition from Asia. There are signs that this is competition from Asia starting to creep in as well in the heat pump market, and we are trying to support European heat pump manufacturing in this regard. So there are two main objectives in this respect on the heat pump production side. One is to strengthen the supply chain for heat pumps, as I said. This is also alongside other technologies such as solar and wind, and also to render the supply chain for heat pumps more sustainable and strengthen the circular economy models in general. Now, related to the policy framework for heat pump manufacturing, again, there are many channels for which this is happening or planning to be happening very soon. Most of these channels actually involve financing and financial instruments and financing channels. Some of them, for example, refer to supporting efforts from member states to pool their resources via so-called important projects of common European interest, and these focus on breakthrough technologies and also innovation along the supply chain for low carbon technologies, including heat pump value chain. Another source of financing or improving access to finance is the innovation fund, as I mentioned before. Then we also have funding for research and innovation, channeling more funding through Horizon Europe to reduce material consumption and also enhance the sustainability of low carbon technologies, including heat pumps. There's also work on acting on the dependency on critical raw materials, and then also the general idea is as well, of course, to mobilize private investment, and one of these channels is via the InvestEU program and the European Investment Bank, because most of these investment needs that I talked about earlier will be partly covered by public funds, but most of the investment needs will be covered by the private markets. And further to these financing channels, mechanisms, and instruments, there's ongoing work on the regulatory framework, EU regulatory framework for visiting the energy labeling and eco design requirements for heat pumps. And also there's also ongoing work in terms of upskilling and reskilling and addressing one of the bottlenecks in terms of heat pump manufacturing and in general low carbon technology manufacturing that usually takes place under the practical skills and trying to establish large-scale skills partnerships. So we encourage stakeholders to join this practical skills and kind of pool efforts to help reskill the workforce so that is better equipped for the jobs in heat pump manufacturing. And then there are a host of other measures that were also communicated for the RePowerEU May Action Plan. And one of these, for example, the bottom box, for example, is to introduce national bans for boilers based on fossil fuels, and also to support member states in ending subsidies for fossil fuel-based boilers. This is ongoing work. There are impact assessments getting around these issues, and we can also probably talk more about this later. Again, relating to the financial instruments and the financing mechanism, as I mentioned, one of the major channels are the recovery and resilience facility. So the recovery and resilience plans, which are put forward by member states to the Commission, and at the moment, these regulations have been revised to account for RePowerEU objectives. So RePowerEU is actually at the heart of this kind of recovery and resilience facility plans. And also the 2022 European semester cycle will have a country-specific recommendations related to RePowerEU objectives. So as you probably know, the member states can actually use the remaining RRF loans, which are estimated to be around 225 billion euros for redistributing these and channeling these towards RePowerEU objectives. There's also additional funding under of around 20 billion provided via the auctioning of ETS allowances, so by the emission trading scheme allowances, and by auctioning these allowances held currently in the market stability reserve. And as mentioned earlier, there's also several mechanisms to reallocate funds between other EU funds, such as the Cohesion Policy Fund, European Agricultural Fund for Rural Development, to the RRF, which in turn will channel the funds towards the RePowerEU chapter. And I think this is the last slide, the Innovation Fund. So we kind of try to pick two main funding mechanism, RRF and the Innovation Fund, which we think are very important for scaling up the supply chain for heat pump manufacturing. As I mentioned, there's RePowerEU mentions the doubling of this year's funding to 3 billion euros. And there will be a call in this respect for the Innovation Fund towards the end of this year for a large-scale call on innovative clean tech manufacturing. And this call will also have a dedicated window for EU production facilities for so-called innovative clean technologies. And this also will include heat pumps. There's a lot of information on eligibility criteria on the past projects, and we provide the website for this host of information on Innovation Fund. So I think this is it from our side at the moment. As Jacek also mentioned, the challenge here is to try to focus more on the upstream side, on the manufacturing side of heat pumps, in addition to already existing deployment challenges that have been going on for the last few years. And I think RePowerEU has shifted strongly in this direction in recognizing the manufacturing challenge. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Sherban and Jacek, for this very detailed presentation on all the different measures related to the heat pump manufacturing and RePowerEU. And now we have a presentation by Andreas Scholz from Data Ahead, and he actually provides a completely different angle on this challenge, namely a solution or a way of meeting this challenge by having a new way of adapting the manufacturing and make it fit for purpose, fit for a large scale up in a short time frame. So curious to hear your presentation, Andreas.
Thanks, Josephine, for the handover. Can you hear me all?
Yes, very well.
And see my screen?
Perfect.
Yes. So thanks for the handover. Yeah, and Sherban said it, we need to invest in production, and this is a completely different angle to be viewed. And in the next couple of minutes, I will tell you from a production point of view what needs to be done to achieve this ambitious goal. To RePowerEU and produce that amount, that huge amount of heat pumps. And just shortly to myself. My name is, as you said, Andreas Scholz. I'm heading the heat pump business unit here at Data Ahead. And I'm a father of 3 lovely kids, and I hope that they will grow up in a greener world. And this is what we're all working for here. And my background is in the test and measurement and production world, where we always try to seek optimization, continuous improvement of production. So this is where I came from, and the heating market is a real hot topic these days to be addressed to scale up production, especially with these measures we heard here. And the heat pump itself, they are the focus of Data Ahead, the company I'm working at. And there are lots of challenges to be addressed around the deployment of heat pumps. And from Sherban, we heard it, that the funding and so on. And of course, the material supply chain, we need to resource or nearshore them back to Europe. It's again the installation part, the legal, the refrigerant, the energy costs are driving us crazy here in Germany. However, Data Ahead itself, we are focusing on the manufacturing part. This is where we are really good at, and where we can bring in value to manufacturers, like you said, it's Thomas, to Siebel or others. And why we are doing that, it's not because it's currently on vogue or it's a high business potential. No, we do it on purpose. We committed 2019 strategically to invest in this heating market with heat pumps, because we truly believe that this is the right technology to reduce the carbon footprint. And it's basically in our mindset. And just to be crystal clear, we are not a manufacturer of heat pumps. However, we deliver complete production lines and test systems for heat pump manufacturers, just to be clear. So what we do is basically, as a manufacturer, you tell us, if you want to go the easy path, you tell us the shop floor area, you tell us the tech time, you give us the details about the products to be produced, and we do the rest for you. We plan, design, and build modern production lines, mostly as a general contractor, completely with our own resources, and we need to bring that on the street, on the shop floor, and get them produced. So this is what we deliver: scale up production in heat pump manufacturers. And being good at it, we also invest heavily in research. So from the production point of view, always to be on the tip of the iceberg to see where we can tweak, where we can optimize production. So for instance, we are also participating in the Fraunhofer Institute project called LC150, where you want to design, where they design, and other vendors, manufacturers of heat pumps are in there, creating really small in-house heat pumps. And we are looking into that from the production point of view. How can they be produced on a massive scale? So this is what we do. And about regarding the challenges, and I think also Sherban mentioned that, is we need to really scale up this production here. And of course, all the manufacturers scaled up in the last years. They tweaked it a little bit for the last year to get this covered, but now they really need to tremendously increase capacity. And the challenge here is in the very short time. So you need to be quick, and this is the challenge, because I was on the road for the last 2 years visiting heat pump manufacturers, and scaling that quickly is posing real problems for them. I would say almost all manufacturers, and especially all the small and medium-sized manufacturers who have not the resources in terms of manufacturing know-how. They don't have the lean experts, they don't have the process experts, methodology experts, and so on. So they are kind of a situation where how can they scale that? And what we've seen is, and it's obvious and okay, is that the most of them is, or the approach is now, hey, let's see what we have, optimize a little bit, and then do the same again, copy deploy approach. And this carries big risk if you want to really scale it quickly, because if you double now production in the next months, years, as you stated, and we are all aware of, is if it goes through the causal chain here, the most of them needs to produce new manufacturing facilities. And I think Thomas stated this, we need a couple of manufacturers now to be created every year now, from now on. And so the challenge there is, first, they need to find a plot of land which fits their demands, their needs, and you need to get them contracted. So this is a 6+ months time effort. So if you have achieved that, you need to build the hall quickly. So you need to find a good contractor from the construction point of view. And then is always the question from them where they are kind of stuck in there is, do I plan the manufacturing hall, or do I plan the manufacturing line and then around it the manufacturing facility? So they are still in discussions and going around what needs to be the best way. And if they have done that yet, then they need to, they need production lines quickly. And from our point of view, and is the production lines itself, they are all massively delayed by material shortage. So we are currently at a delivery time of around 12+ months to get from the order manufacturing line deployed at a customer's production facility. So there are already months, year plus done till they are able to scale production. And if they have done that, so they still need to find a lot of personnel in high quantities to staff these approach. So the question really is this the right approach? What can be done differently from we do it the same way as we did it always? So what is the disruptive approach? What can be done differently? And this is what I give some ideas. I want to show our know-how, our ideas. Because the heat pump production is at a threshold. It's a threshold because we need to evolve from the current production methodology to a professional industrial production. We need to optimize processes. We need to have a higher degree of automation, like you see here in the automotive industry. And I think you all agree with us that we are not have reached this level yet in the heat pump manufacturing space. We are not there yet. And it's precisely this transformation to an industrial production that we need to master. We must master that jointly together. I think here really everybody needs to have the other to go after that. And this is our daily business here at DataHead. We are home in the industrial production for more than 20 years, and before we 29 specialized on the heat pump production, we delivered production lines and test systems to the automotive industry, to the white goods, to healthcare, sensors and industrial production. So the question, but now would be, so why we are the right guys to transfer the know-how into the heat pump manufacturing space? Because I know others tried that yet. And however, we have our customer base in the heating market for 19 years now. So we we especially know the needs and demands from the heating market, especially from the manufacturing part of heat pumps. So this is what we are into. That's why we know what needs or can be transferred to an optimized production. And to give you some ideas now where we see a tremendous benefits in changing the production perspective is first is test times. I've rarely seen products being tested so thoroughly and long like the heat pumps. We need to bring down test times. Looking at or seeing different manufacturing plants from small, medium enterprises to big enterprises, they are in common in between half an hour and 2 hours per heat pump in an end-of-line test system. So there is a real stuck bottleneck if you want to really scale up, because if you do the math and you test in half an hour, or even 2 hours, you want to scale up, you need to double, triple, 8, 10, 20 times needs to copy and deploy these test systems. And the test systems are mainly the most investment part of production lines. And the only thing you can address that is to really bring down test times. And for instance, here on the right-hand image here, you see a deployed test system from us where we have testing, I think, salt water heat pumps where we tested within optimized 17 minutes and testing 2 at a time. Here we are coming up to roughly 6. However, this is 48 a day and so on. It's not the right optimized thing to scale massively. So we need always to bring that test time down and cost down, because the cost in a couple of years will matter. So we need to bring it down, and this is what we currently really focusing and working on. So this warm test with the 17 minutes, for instance, here is really a topic, and we brought it down to 17 minutes. We need to tweak it down, but even further, there are ideas around, and we discussed this also with big manufacturers, smaller manufacturers, is the topic of dry testing. Dry test would significantly bring down the test time, needs some parameters and surrounding to be set. And if you have achieved that, you can even go further down to a pure functional test. And then you are in a single digit low couple of minutes test time. This will really speed up the manufacturing process in the throughput and takt time for the output. And the second part is soldering. And I think everybody who is in the manufacturing space of heat pumps knows this huge time-consuming part of soldering. And we have roughly 30 soldering points to be addressed in this process of getting all the copper and so stuff together. And there's kind of an anecdote where when I visited a bigger vendor a couple of weeks ago, and they showed me their plan of speed up production by tripling it in 2 years. They again had deployed kind of the same what we have today, and a third of the shop floor for production is again only for soldering occupied. So there's a tremendous amount of people needed to flame soldering these joints there. And it's air polluting, it's manual process, and this needs to be addressed. And there are a couple of angles you can tweak in here. And one of them is, for instance, you see it here on the right-hand side, we deployed it as a customer is inductive soldering. The advantage of inductive soldering here is really it's not air polluting. You use energy, can be from green energy supply, and it is readiness for automation. So we can have here automated processes to speed up production with this kind of inductive soldering technology. And as I said earlier, that we are also in the research part, so we're currently trying to partner up with a robotics manufacturer and looking into laser soldering, what can be achieved here in terms of faster soldering, even difficult to reach joints where we have no chance today with the inductive soldering. So is robotics compared with laser soldering next step upwards to bring also this process time of soldering down to speed up production. So this is my second bottleneck I want to share. And to put a third bottleneck onto the plate, literally here is the personnel we need. So we need a lot of personnel in production. And the problem here, and it's all around Europe, is we do not find specialized personnel. We need to work with non-specialized personnel. And as also a story when I visited a manufacturer in the Alpine landscape, they were kind of lucky by increasing production capacity in the last 2 years because they hired a lot of people from the gastronomy market as they were laid off during the COVID pandemic. So they got the resources on board. They were lucky and were able to produce. However, they are not specialized in it. So the start was pretty bumpy. It is a kind of a long, messy middle term to bring up production to a high quality assembled product. And there we have also approaches like digital worker guidance, which we lent from another industry. You see it here on the right-hand image. On the background, this is an assembly line, a continuous flow assembly line which we deployed in the heating market. Where you see in the background screen, there's kind of a learning on the job. The people are having instructions visually or by text or by video, so they know exactly what needs to be done to assemble a product. Even can be connected to screwdrivers, so the screwdriver torque can be put down, get back. So you even can increase your transparency of your production, really to have a more transparent, optimized, high quality production. So this was my third topic, and a third one is really, if you look onto the production from a more general point of view, is what is the right production method? Is it when you come from the idle production, like many are into the line production or even continuous flow or other production methods? What needs to be done, what needs to be shifted to look from an overall perspective, having all processes being optimized, the automation, what is the flow you need to achieve or address with your targets you want to go after. And just to say so much here, our latest production line, we achieve here a takt time of 540 seconds, which is 9 minutes takt time, including warm testing. And we are heavily working on it to bring it down to a 360 seconds takt time. And this is where we really shortened shop floor space compared with really short takt times to get output increased and have more heat pumps produced. And coming to my last tip, I call it the bonus tip, or personally I call it the King's class, is and it sounds simple, but it's, to be honest, pretty difficult. I rarely seen it in other markets, in other industries, is bring together R&D and production. It's if you think through and you invest a lot in the R&D for really good products with good S-corp and so on, is of course good, but you need to address the production from the point of view from the production side, because if you are able to create a production ready product, you will be much more faster in the throughput time and takt time, and you bring down the cost. So really look into how can we solve it more efficiently with inductive charging and so on. There's a huge potential if you bring these two departments together and design optimized production ready products. So kind of break down the silos and bring them together and optimize. And looking into these different topics about increasing capacity faster, like the processes, the methods, the collaboration. I will tell you something now which might sound negative in the first, but it's actually good news for almost any manufacturer. The heat pump production still has an enormous amount of catching up to do. So they are not there yet where other industries like the automotive is. However, we jointly can exploit most of this potential very quickly with relatively simple measures such as those I described here earlier. Really look into, and we are able to optimize them. We are lacking behind, but there are ways now to get and achieve faster production. This is, and don't go after I do it as I always did it. And the last point we are after also internally is another building block of increasing capacity expansion is through shared modules. And there I have two ideas in my mind. First, it's for instance, the refrigeration unit, or for instance, the four-way valve. So it would make, from our point of view, it would make much more sense to jointly manufacture these modules or components together, like the automotive industry is doing it successfully since years. And when you're doing it, so even other manufacturing methods are possible, and fully automated production lines can become real. And this would be significantly speed up production, because these modules are at a really high volume, and it's always about high volume. If you have a really high volume to be produced, you can use other production methods, more robotics, more automation, and so on. And it's 24/7 production, and you get the components or modules produced somewhere, bundled, and then get it to the assembly lines of the different manufacturers. So this would also support, like Serban said it, with the objectives of e-source Europe. And I would call this kind of a type, not a giga, but maybe a mega factory for modules or components in Europe for Europe. And this is what I would say, this can be really topics who drive us here in the European area to deploy heat pumps. So with that, I'm ready and looking forward for the discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Andreas. Before we dig into the questions and discuss in the panel, I would first like to give the word to Holger Tam from Stiebel Eltron, even though he was not, he was only joining in the Q&A and not, proposed as one of the presenters. I think it's very, very interesting also to have maybe his first reaction to the presentation of the Commission and of Data Ahead on these new methods, and maybe to see also the insights from a manufacturer and what your reaction is to this.
Yeah, thanks, Josephine. Yes, of course, I'm happy to join at this part of the discussion. So one statement, let's say one general statement first. So of course, this is a challenge at itself to increase the production and then later the installation of heat pumps throughout Europe. But now it comes with two other great challenges that we have. We are still recovering from the COVID worldwide in means of supply chains, and of course with the Ukraine war that doesn't help a thing. So this is, of course, another situation we never had before, maybe. So we do our best and still pledge that it is possible to deliver the heat pumps. You already mentioned double-digit growth in the last year. We will see it this year as well. So let's say we are kind of on track, I think. And what comes when it comes toward this is things like we see today, where in this case the Commission and talks to the industry, and as Jacek asked in the beginning, he wants to listen and to hear from us what needs to be done. So the same level took place last week in Germany with a special heat pump summit, where let's say all parts of the market, all of the value chain came together from the ministry the producers of heat pumps, the installers, component manufacturers, utilities, and so on, and pledged for now based on Germany, but still a threefold uptake of heat pumps. So if we tackle it this way, really at a joint forces, and then it's possible that we can reach these goals. And yeah, this may be for now. And I made already some notes that I can add to what Andreas said and what Jacek said, but maybe this is better done with the questions of the field.
Thank you very much, Holger. Yeah, I think we should first maybe dig into the more clarification questions from the public. So we have someone, Lorcan Lyons, who asks, in what ways is heat pump manufacturing different in China, the United States, Japan, or others? Is someone having an answer to that?
Well, I at least can give some ideas. Maybe Andreas is more an expert on productions than though I'm not an expert on productions, as you know. I'm here for Stiebel Electron as policy experts. But what is important to know, and this is how I understood it, and maybe we are at on this break-even point now. So the heat pumps. The heat pumps basically still rely on components from the refrigerant industry, from air conditioners, let's say. So we need to go a step ahead and produce components that are only, let's say, dedicated for heat pumps, and the requirements heat pumps have, and so on. And this maybe is the answer to your question, that at this point of time, as I understood, that Asia and US manufacturers are stemming from this air conditioning, big numbers of productions in this field, and of course have therefore economy of scale advantage. But we should, with a more dedicated production of heat pumps, are able, to have this advantage on our side.
Okay, anyone wants to add to this? Maybe Thomas or Andreas?
Yeah, maybe one comment is what we also see is the different manufacturers landscape in Europe, where they are from less small, medium enterprises to a couple of bigger manufacturers in Europe, despite the real big ones coming from China in this case. And what we see is the Chinese manufacturers, if they are pretty big, they have other or already more automated manufacturing lines where they can produce cheaper and kind of might flood the market. So this is what we kind of see as a challenge here. We need to invest in securing our production in Europe. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Maybe then a question related to that and to the Commission, because you mentioned in your presentation about Jacek and Serban, so the experience you had with the solar industry that actually collapsed in Europe and moved to Asia, and that you want to learn from this, or how to say, also to prevent that this also happens in other industries. Could you explain a bit like what you learned at the Commission level from this experience, and which things should be avoided and which actions you foresee to avoid this?
Shall maybe I could start. Well, thanks for this question, and I think it also links a little bit to the question that Thomas asked in the chat about whether we are still open to production sites from companies from Asia. And of course, I would like to clarify that Europe is not changing its approach to a market economy, open market economy. We are still open to trade. We are still bound by WTO rules. We still apply the same competition rules and public procurement rules, which of course are different from, for example, when you see what the US is doing with industrial policy, where it's all about tariffs and buy American and so on. So I think we still see merit in all of this open approach, but at the same time, we see a need for an active policy approach to certain products and industries that we consider as strategic. And I think the way we can approach it, it cannot be so, let's say, simple in a way as the US is doing it with Buy American. I think we will still primarily want to drive the competitiveness of EU industries through innovation, because if you mentioned the example of the solar PV industry, the reason why the solar PV industry is starting to re-emerge in the EU is not because we have imposed tariffs on imports from Asia, but because there is innovation happening in the EU, which allows to improve the efficiency of those products and their cost competitiveness. So that's one of the levers to stimulate more innovation, and that's why we have what Sherban mentioned, that under the Innovation Fund there will be more funds available. And I think that also links to what Andreas was talking about all the improvements that can be achieved through production optimization. In that context, I would like to mention, and I think Sherban already talked about it, but I would like to repeat it, that the focus of instruments such as in the Innovation Fund so far has been entirely on technology innovation. But now we see this challenge of scale up in the short term, and that's why the Innovation Fund, for example, will still be focused on innovation, but on not only technology innovation but also process innovation. And in that context, I think it's worth for your industry, and I'm sure you're doing this already, to follow closely the process leading up to this call that will be issued around November. So what I would say is we don't completely overhaul our instruments. We rather refocus them a little bit. I would like to also here ask a question to you in this panel, and also maybe the audience. For financing beyond support to innovation, where do you see the biggest need? Because for the moment, of course, support to manufacturing of market-ready technology is constrained by state aid rules. So you cannot really subsidize the scale-up of a manufacturing plant beyond maybe the so-called assisted regions, so regions that are less well-off in the EU. Now, there might be scope to relax those rules, given that we are in a kind of a warlike situation right now with Russia. And so a question to you, what type of support a manufacturer in, say, Germany, a manufacturer in Germany that wants to scale up in the next 12 months his production site, does he need some kind of financial support? Not necessarily a grant, but for example, a credit guarantee. When he goes to his bank, does he have problems in obtaining the loan?
Thank you, Jacek. I think this is a question for Holger and maybe also for Thomas.
Yeah, yes, I will come back to this question. But I wanted to first add to the question of the feeling regarding the example of solar and wind. And from my perspective, the problem with solar and wind was that we destroyed the home market a few years ago. So first we had incentives for solar, especially in Germany, and had a big market, and then we destroyed the market. So this is what we don't have to do, what we not do now with heat pumps. So if we want to support the European manufacturers, we need a strong home market. This is then our advantage. So for your question regarding financial support, I don't think this is the main issue. You can always support in this way that you not subsidize the product for the end consumer, but support what is now needed to the manufacturers to invest in the production sites, and the same may account for the installers if they decide to re-educate in this field of heat pumps, for example. Yeah, it's possible to it's always good to support, but maybe not the first thing that is needed. So what I can tell you is, like I mentioned with the example from the German Heat Pump Summit, to have this clear statement that there is this direction and this is the main thing. And that what follows from this is more in detail what we discussed today already. We already mentioned, for example, microchips for the heat pumps is something that is really scarce. So not the copper. Maybe this is a commodity that is possible to get, but microchips is really an issue. What we put, if the Commission talks about a bigger plan, of European production of microchips, we do not forget that there's a need within heat pumps as well. The second point is don't create new scarcities within for F-gases, for example. So if the Commission has it in his own hands to create the surroundings of within the F-gas regulation, so that there is no scarcity in F-gases, but that we, as an industry, have a clear timeline of F-gases to be used in heat pumps in order to realize this uptake of heat pumps. And then there is the part maybe that switches to what Andreas presented. Yes, there is the opportunity for things like heat exchangers, especially heat exchangers for heat pumps or compressors for heat pumps or modules that Andreas has in mind, to have a shared production, or in the terms of the European Commission, to have kind of important IPCEs. So in this regard, it's possible to support the heat pump industry. Yeah, maybe this is some answers at this point of time.
Thank you. Someone wants to add to this?
Yeah, I would like to come in, Josephine.
Yes.
On the question that I think both Jacek and Serban have asked, do we need this financing, and which other solutions do we need to support the financing of the investments that are necessary? What I'm hearing from our members is that if the business case is okay, you find financing. So one of the most important points that where we expect the Commission to act is to really correct the business case for heating with renewable energies. And that's even extending, it's going outside of what heat pumps are doing. We need to make it clear that if you use fossil energy for heating, then you pay the price. You pay the price for the external effects. So it's really with regret that we see that the ETS for buildings has not been extended to buildings now. It's only on the horizon for the future. And we hope that it can be moved forward as fast as possible. We think it's a very good idea what the Commission has proposed to use eco-design to make it impossible to sell single individual fossil boilers. That's of course the other option. If you cannot correct the market mechanism, you can simply ban certain application areas because of environmental reasons. And then of course the whole discussion on electrification and electricity taxation is something. The electricity taxation, the energy taxation directive is making a good proposal here. And last, the introduction of a CO2 price on the national level. So all these things will improve the economics. And then we talk about guarantees. That could be something, but for all the things that you have mentioned, I'm personally overwhelmed by the number of vehicles that are presented. You know, 200, if I noted it down properly, 210 billion euros until 2027. Now I ask myself, how do I access that money? Is there any, a guide or a way for end users? If Andreas, for example, comes and says, we are also an industry, we would like to invest, we would like to benefit from this funding. How do I get to it? Is there a single stop shop to explain to me how I can make use of what you are proposing here, or is that only happening on the member state level? Then if so, who do I talk to? That seems to be always very confusing for the normal participant in a market. And the last one on, there's this discussion about skills. And I think it's important that we back the skills development with funding, that we make it attractive on a European level to work in the manufacturing of heat pumps and other renewable systems, and also work in installing them. Thank you.
Thank you, Thomas. I think that's two questions that actually are directed to the Commission. So, Sherban and Jacek, could you give a bit more information into whether there is this single stop shop or this single access point on all these different vehicles and financing methods? And then secondly, on the skills, so we've heard about the skills initiative, but yeah, how could you give a bit more explanation on that? And is funding also foreseen in that initiative?
Sherban, maybe I could, thank you. Maybe I could take the one on financing and you take the one on skills, if fine for you. So on financing, Thomas, just to clarify, the slide, I think it was the second slide that Sherban showed with the 200 or so billion. This is not the new money or funds that the Commission is putting on the table. These are the overall estimated investment needs to achieve RePowerEU objectives, which is, broadly speaking, get rid of Russian gas imports. So this money will have to primarily come from the private sector, but what the Commission is doing is putting on the table some additional, let's say, seed money that if you look, if you use in a smart way, can of course be kind of scaled up. And second, you know, we are also putting on the table an enabling framework to make these investments happen, for example, by increasing the targets under the Energy Efficiency Directive. And of course, all this still needs to be validated by member states. So in terms of new money, what is really on the table, what Sherban mentioned is this additional funds under the Innovation Fund. And second, the additional 20 billion euros that would be available specifically for RePowerEU objectives, including the manufacturing of clean technologies, clean energy technologies, under the Recovery and Resilience Facility. But this money, basically, is channeled through the member states. It's a little bit like the structural funds. So there's no central point where the Commission would inform beneficiaries on what is available. That's really, I mean, your point of contact would be in Germany, or in Poland or in Spain, the relevant authorities, probably the Ministry of Finance or Ministry of Funds, and the National Promotional Bank, like KfW or CDC in France. So, you know, I get your point, and we hear it often that it's all like very complex landscape to navigate in terms of financing, but I think for this there is no single point of contact.
But just to if you allow me, then that means that you yourself, you on the high level, you earmark these funds, but then you're not receiving information from the member states how these funds are invested. So I could not ask you, okay, so for Poland,
yeah,
how is the Polish share then made available to the industry? This is not information that is available.
Well, it's an information that will be available through the so-called recovery and resilience plans, you know, things that the Commission has to approve, which will include very detailed, actually, so-called milestones and targets for investments and reforms. And there, what we want to do in GROW is to, when we talk to member states, to encourage them to also invest some of these funds in the new manufacturing sites for heat pumps, solar, and wind. So we will be aiming at influencing member states, and this information would be available publicly. Sherban, would you like to follow up on the skills?
Yeah, sure. I mean, on top of my head, I don't have much information, but most of these skilling and upskilling initiatives, which are jointly made with colleagues from DG Employment and some cases from DG Ener. energy side. I mean, they usually take place under the so-called Pact for Skills, and this Pact for Skills is a collaboration between industry and government and policy. So it's kind of a new engagement and governance model for joint skills and endeavor. So it just the pact aims to mobilize kind of all relevant stakeholders. So it's something that more or less shapes gradually and to some extent initiatives from the private side, from the industry side. As far as I know, no such skills partnership has yet been formed on the heat pump front. I think there is for wind energy, but for heat pumps, not yet. But I can dig out more information and come back to you in terms of processes and mechanism.
Okay, thank you. Yes, I think.
Just to add that there are some best practice examples, I think, that are worth looking at and considering whether they could be replicated. For example, for batteries, you know, that's one of the success stories of Europe, that we have this battery alliance that contributed, because of course there were also market forces driving that, above all market forces, but the alliance also contributed to developing real manufacturing capacity for batteries in the EU in the last 5 years. The battery alliance is managed by what you could call a green tech incubator, partly financed by the EU, which is called the EIT Inno Energy. And what EIT Inno Energy is doing currently, they are developing a project called the Battery Academy, where they are creating really local antennas focused on very practical skill centers for training people to actually work in battery manufacturing sites. And, you know, here we can think whether the same kind of approach and project could be also in the future applied to heat pumps.
Okay, thank you. That sounds indeed very interesting and something definitely to explore further for our sector as well. When we were talking about the Innovation Fund, I also wanted to maybe inform both the panelists and the public that last week we held a workshop together with DG Klima on the Innovation Fund and the call specifically for heat pumps, and it's available on the YouTube channel of EHPA for everyone who wants to have a deeper dive into this Innovation Fund call for heat pumps. So I would jump on to a next question that we have received in the Q&A. Someone says, we spoke a lot about quantity, so millions of heat pumps per year, but what about quality? So 2 questions. What are your projections in terms of cost reduction, units over years? Please give a number if possible. And what about units efficiency projections? Who would like to answer this, Thomas or Holger?
I can quickly say that in general, we accept and acknowledge that economies of scale do apply also to heat pumps, and the typical cost reduction is 20% if you double the installed stock. Now we have 17 million units installed, so once we are at about 30 million, which should be in 2026 about, then you can expect 20% reduction. However, I do think that probably there is even more cost reduction if you look at the whole value chain. And there are service offerings that would allow higher savings overall. So then really that means you try to forward and backward integrate, but that is not the current business model that most of the players in the market are pursuing. So that needs to be clear. And when it comes to quality, we do see that the heat pump quality is actually very high. The efficiency has improved over time. And some people hate me for that, but I want to say it nonetheless. If we would have a little bit less legislative intervention in what heat pumps are doing, then the industry would have some time to also improve efficiency. You have to consider that from 2010 to 2021, we had to review the whole refrigeration issue. So there has been tremendous redesigns of the whole product just to accommodate for new refrigerants. And we are in the process of doing that again. We had to follow eco-design, both on fans, on motors, and on the unit itself. Again, that required quite a significant amount of R&D. And if you consider that this is basically now all established, then I would assume that if we can focus on improvement of efficiency and reduction of cost, this will be the current focus. So we need to be a bit careful, and we are reminding the policymakers and the legislator of this effect, to understand that if you make a small change on the product, there is always ripple effects on the whole production. And even if it only means that you have to recertify components and the whole product, it's never just a small thing. That's for sure true. You say, okay, 2 decibels less, out of a sudden you need a bigger fan. The bigger fan needs a bigger case. The bigger case doesn't fit your tools. And so I think Andreas can probably talk hours about that. It would be very advisable to invite all the legislators into factories to show them, if you turn this screw, there is an impact at the end of the packaging line. Thank you.
Yeah, maybe one comment here. I fully support what you said, Thomas. And there was one question on here is regarding the quality, and you also discussed it a little bit. What we often hear is, hey, you want to reduce test time, so this must have impact on the quality, but that's not the case. The case is with the production processes they have today, which are so highly manual, they waste a lot of time. I kind of never heard of lean production, so we need to get rid of the waste in production. And waste is this is a lot of manual processes, nothing automated. So the manufacturer is asking me, this is possible? Is that, of course it's possible to do it automatically. This is done in other industries for decades. And so they are not on this automated process level yet. And there is a lot of things you can achieve by simple measures to bring test time down without losing any kind of quality.
Just a few comments to add to this. So we are doing several things at the same time now. So we are heavily increasing the production lines. We have to redevelop, as Thomas said, the refrigeration cycle due to the F-gas regulation. We are at the break point. What I already mentioned, maybe to switch from air conditioner components to heat pump components, real heat pump components. At the same time, meaning regarding cost reduction, I mean, of course, you know what the prices are for copper and other microchip, and even get them. So this is you cannot. Yeah, you can answer this question in the ideal world. And in the ideal world, of course, there is this 20 or 30% cost reduction possible over the next 10 years. And to add to what Thomas mentioned, and using Andreas' example for test times, of course, if you save time, you save your money, that brings down the cost. But on the other side, Jacek and Serban, the Commission is talking about third-party certification, eco-design, so doing even more tests for heat pumps. We're talking about a complete new test method. This is eco-design details now, but that they are there. About the compensation method, we are talking about requirements for self-monitoring that the heat pumps should have in the future, and about the accuracy about this self-monitoring. So it is just not to say no boundary conditions anymore for heat pumps, but we need to see the big picture. And if we ask for scaling up, for better efficiency, for lower cost, this will not work altogether at the same point of time if we in addition have, let's say, constraints or obstacles that are, let's say, made through regulations. So there's good day to start talking to you today, and let's keep this up with you and the other colleagues of the European Commission. Thank you.
Thank you, Holger. Jacek and Serban, do you want to react to this?
Yeah, I no, these are good points. I fully take your point that the you know, because we in Grow, I must say, when we are developing our thinking about what we could do for the industry, for the scale up, we often focus on things like financing and the type of things where Grow, I think, excels. It's building industrial alliances and so on. But from what you tell me, the most important thing is still the most impactful one. It's regulation, right? So what Thomas was saying, set the right incentives through the ETS, through the taxation legislation, set an enabling framework through eco-design, and also, you know, when you set certain rules under eco-design, take into account our strategic objectives for scale-up. When we talk about things like F-gases, that's not eco-design, F-gas regulation, and under eco-design third-party certification. So these points are fully taken. But I would just like to, if you allow me to come back to one of the elements that we also want to kind of explore also with you, is the supply chain disruptions, because there I think it's difficult from a policy perspective to address supply chain disruptions, of course. But for some very targeted products, there are ways of, I don't know, pulling demand, or even if you talk about chips, you know, the CHIPS Act allows, for example, to, in exceptional cases, to orientate the supply of chips towards strategic sectors. So I think there we already started some exploratory discussions with member states, where we said, you know, for RePowerEU, we have the strategic objectives, and chips are used by heat pumps, by solar, by wind installation, and so on. So this is something that we started exploring, and I think this will lead to something concrete. But beyond the chips, I mean, do you see, are there any specific components that you see as particularly problematic? I already heard Holger saying that copper, well, the price increases, but it's not that there are shortages. Are there any other items you would see here as problematic?
Holger or Thomas?
Yeah, from my perspective, so it is the first things that I had to mention were the chips that really just simply, if you look into what is happening into the company right now, what is about the component manufacturers. So this is really the shortage is mostly in microchips, and then we of course talked about this F-gas issue. Other things else, yes, of course, it's problematic. The prices went up. You have to have more stock because maybe the supply chains are interrupted for copper and the regular materials and steel and so on. So yeah, you have to show a higher effort in order to get those materials. It takes more time, you need more stock. That's true. It could be supported by the Commission, but compared to chips, it can be handled as for now.
Okay, Thomas, do you want to add anything?
Actually, I would like to ask Andreas if a redesign of products and a redesign of production could actually help to use less components, and would that help us to reduce these bottlenecks? Because they are there, and from what I see is that the demand has increased so fast that now there is not a quick fix. So you could also say both to Serhan and Jacek, that if we had taken a clear stance 5 years ago, we wouldn't be in the trouble that we have today. And just let me say that we have always heard technology neutrality. This technology neutrality mantra has brought us into the mess that we are in. We should have had technology clarity to say we have good solutions for certain application areas, and if we had executed up on it, including energy efficiency first, we would be in a different situation. But Andreas, I would really be interested in understanding how a different production design could help us reduce the overall input.
I mean, it would have a tremendous effort of ease the production if we would go after a simplified product, for instance. So what we see is a hell lot of different products, models out there who need to be produced. So this is a kind of a neck breaker for manufacturers when we see, hey, we need another multifunctional line to produce our X different products. So this is first one of the topics we see often, and we really emphasize to, hey, you need to get it straight, try to simplify your products, use what's needed, and then ramp up production, because the more volume we produce of one kind of a heat pump, the easier can you get your supply chain straight. You get a better cost perspective from your procurement, from your input value, and then you can lower the cost for the customer. So then this again coming back to the 20% you stated, Thomas. If you really scale up to one thing, standardize more, you can fasten up production, you can bring down costs. In my presentation, I stated one little topic. I called it, it's called the four-way valve. We hear it really from different vendors. If that product with its sensors and pipes and so on would be standardized, and we can get this from any vendor out there, we don't mind. This would really ease the production process, because it's a difficult thing to process in the assembly line. And this would, for instance, this would be one thing that really can help to ease up production.
Thank you, Andreas. Then we had one question related to the challenges for production lines if flammable refrigerants are used. So that's in the current discussion on the revision of the F-gas regulation. Would someone want to react to that?
Maybe one quick comment from my side. The flammable refrigerants, for instance, the propane is a topic everywhere. We are not used to work with it, and we are really putting effort into with other companies, partnering up with them, how to address this on an elegant way to ensure quality, to ensure that risk is down, and to address all these topics. But there's a real uncertainty in the manufacturers, in the production floor, how these flammable gases needs to be addressed. It can be simple if you know it, but not of the manufacturers are not aware what needs to be done to ease out this process type. This is what we really hear often, that they kind of aware and hesitate to go after that. But this can be handled. We are doing it, and yeah, it's achievable. Thanks.
Thank you.
So of course it can be handled. I mean, but I can bring this example of using propane as a gas for forms of isolations, for example. Of course you can use it, but for example, you need a different situation in your construction line. So you need more space. You need to create more security checks or whatever. I don't know the correct word now in English, but it is possible. It for example needs more space. It maybe costs a little bit more to implement this. But of course, it can be handled. But as I said, it is needs a new approach. And regarding the not the production line itself, but the product itself. So so of course, it is possible to use that refrigerant as a refrigerant in heat pumps, but this has a lot more, let's say, things to overcome, not only the production line itself, but that you really have to be able to use heat pumps for all different applications. With propane, for example, you really need to develop new components, for example, to bring down the amount of propane you need in one product. is a goal so that it can be installed, also inside. And this means new components within this product. So you have to develop first with your component manufacturers before you then talk about production line. So everything is possible. It's a question of time. It's a question of money. And as I said, with the example of the isolation of tanks, a question of space.
Thank you, Holger. We have come to the end of today's webinar. There's still quite a lot of questions that have not been answered. I would encourage everyone that has put a question and has not seen an answer, maybe to write also their email address into the chat or the Q&A. We will gather all the questions and try to reply to you after the webinar. So unless someone has something very important that they still wanted to mention and that was not addressed, I would make a conclusion of today's webinar. Is there anyone that says this thing, I really want to mention this before we close? No? Okay, then thank you very much. This was very, very interesting and very timely. It's, how do you say, heat pumps are really booming at the moment, I would say, and we need all hands on deck, as Thomas also mentioned, to really, to make this ambition a reality. And I would say that as a conclusion from today's webinar, it's very clear that we all need to work together to face this challenge together with the EC, but also with all the stakeholders and with innovative industries, for example, such as Data Ahead. And ideally, this would happen in a heat pump alliance, which was also proposed by Jacek. So this would be an ideal way to bring all the stakeholders together and look into the best way to upscale production. We also need innovation. We need these new ideas. We need people. We very much need technology clarity, and we also need all regulation to really look towards the same direction and to not obstruct this massive scale up of industries, and most specifically in eco-design and the F-gas regulation. So that's how I would sum up today's webinar. So thank you very much. We will normally also publish this on our YouTube channel in case you want to rewatch, because a lot of interesting things have been said. Thank you very much, and hope to see you all soon in one of our next webinars.
Thank you, Josephine.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
For hosting us. Bye.
Bye-bye.